Yeah, good, brother. Very good. Can't complain. Like you, the sun is shining on that side of the of New Zealand. It's nice here. It's nice, breezy. Very,
Yeah,
very nice.
nice one.
How are we going? Are we ready? We got 1 minute. We got 1 minute to chill out before we go live on.
All right, okay. Well, I'll have another swig of my coffee.
We're live, and we're also live on Facebook. Beach, there's going to be about 3 segments, right? And so each segment we come off, we'll go to a radio break, but we're still live on Facebook. Is that
okay? All right, okay.
You can do your shout outs as well.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for this, Beach.
No, pleasure.
You made our national papers here. There's a beautiful picture of you in the front cover.
Really?
I'll take a photo and send it through. Yeah. It talked about your disappointment.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's.
Well, I hope there's disappointment right across our community, Inga.
Yes.
Both up in the islands and in New Zealand. I'm certain that's the case because it's incomprehensible that they haven't agreed to it. Really, I just.
They said that they deferred it or they declined it.
Well, it's declined for 2021, and we obviously felt that going forward, the chance of putting a team together in 2021 would be a great opportunity to get all the cobwebs out and sort out what needed to be done.
Yeah, BG, we're gonna go live in about 5 seconds. Okay.
Okay.
Too fast to see now. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Inga Da Winger's Sporting Hour here on 87.5 FM Radio Samoa. And if you're tuning in around the globe, wherever you are, welcome to our very special program. I've got a very special guest with me in the house, in the studio with me. Oh, actually on Zoom. But just a beautiful welcoming this morning on a Monday morning here in Apia Harbour. It's actually nice and breezy, 24 degrees outside, so it's nice and warm. Anyway, I hope you had a fantastic weekend. And, joining me is a very special dear friend of mine. He's what I would call the godfather of rugby in my days growing up, in terms of the wonderful example that he's been, a wonderful role model, a hero to thousands and thousands of Pacific Islanders and New Zealanders as well, all around the globe. When he first burst onto the scene as a young teenage, a 19-year-old All Black Samoan, you probably guess him. He plays in the same position that I used to play in, and that is the wonderful Tufasasina, Sir Bryan Williams, BG, Aka BG. Welcome. Good morning, BG.
Yeah, good morning, Inga. Talofa. Talofa to all your listeners as well.
Well, myself, you and me, we'll go a long, long way back. And as the program progresses, I'll just inform people of this wonderful, what I call a very special friendship that me and you have had for a long, long time. And like I said earlier on, you've been a wonderful role model, a superhero to many, many of our Pacific Islanders and New Zealanders over the years. And, just to be able to have you on my show here in Samoa and Apia. And I know we're zooming in and out on this program, but it's just wonderful having you on board. For those who are just tuning in, the Sir Bryan Williams, All Black, number 689. Okay, club played for Ponsonby, is a die-hard Ponsonby, or ponies as they say. BG, he's still wearing his ponies. Started way back in 1968 to 82. Played for Auckland, over 132 games for our province, for the mighty Auckland Blues, and also coached the Manu Samoa, and which was a real high, one of his highlights. And I know that because I was one of the players that he selected in his national team. Also coached Auckland, and that was when I first got my big break as a teenager, when BG came down to Carlton Boys and picked me and asked me to come in and be part of the Ponsonby setup here. And But just, you know, the list just goes on. The accolades that this man has had is just incredible. Back in 1983, now listen to this, he was awarded the British Order of Merit of the British Empire. Now that's something we hardly hear, BG. We hardly hear that kind of, you know, achievement so far, you know. Then back in 2013, he was awarded the Queen's Medal for the New Zealand Order of Merit. And then 2018, he was knighted and was named Sir Bryan Williams for services to rugby and community. So that's my guest, my wonderful friend. We call him BG. Is that okay just to call you BG?
Absolutely, Inga. Absolutely, my friend. Well, Inga, I just, you made reference there to Kelston Boys High School, and I remember the first time I met you, and I've got to say, it wasn't a nice experience for me, Inga, because we played against your team, and you just played for New Zealand under-16s, and I was playing for a Ponsonby team against you, and we marked one another, and I was about 35 years old, you were 16, and you ran inside me, you ran outside me, you ran over me, you scored 5 tries, and I was left battered and bruised at the end of the day. So although I grew to like you, I didn't like you that much that day.
You're very generous, BG. I think out of all my tries, all of them, you actually let me through. You were very gracious to allow me to show you up. But I still remember that game. Funnily enough, I still remember that game, and it was just one of my highlights was be able to come up against you, because as a young Pacific Island kid growing up in New Zealand, we used to finish our games in the mornings playing for our clubs, and then we used to rush down to see the senior team play, and that you were on the wing, and obviously for Auckland, and I was on the top of the shoulders of my uncles and all that back in the 70s and 80s, and we just marvel at the way you just run with the ball. You didn't kick, which was a bit like me. I learned all these skills off you. You don't kick, you just run the ball. ABG.
Well, absolutely. I've never been able to score a try without the ball in my hand, have you?
I remember, BG, you were the coach of the Ponsonby team, and we were playing Maris. And I remember early on in my career, and you said, you know, I was playing against, we were playing against Maris. And Maris is another team that was full of All Blacks, you know, Terry White, Bernie McCall, John Kerwin, and the list just goes on. And I remember marking John Kerwin, and in the first half, I would just keep, every time I got the ball, I was in awe of John Kerwin. I would just keep kicking it. And I remember you saying to me at halftime, Inga, we didn't choose you, we didn't select you to kick the ball. We chose you so you can run with the ball, you know, and it was such a great encouragement. BG, you know, you're here because not only you're a wonderful role model, but an example, you're a trailblazer, but also this whole thing that's been coming up in the media about this Pacific Island team and the Super Rugby Aotearoa. And there's been a little bit of, well, I think there's been a public outcry, the disappointment from the news that's been announced that we are not included in that Super Rugby Aotearoa for 2021. Can you elaborate a little bit about that, BG?
Well, in the last 12 months, New Zealand Rugby commissioned a report to report back on the state of New Zealand rugby and what needed to happen going forward. And I guess it took into account the COVID-19 scenario, which means that, you know, border restrictions and all of those sort of things needed to be taken into account. So that report was done, and it highly recommended the inclusion of a Pacifica team in Super Rugby Aotearoa. So New Zealand Rugby then embarked upon a bid process, encouraging bidders to bid for a place in that competition. There were 8 groups apparently who actually applied, including the Samoan Rugby Union and including the Fiji Rugby Union. The group that I am involved with, Moana Pacifica, is a group of Pacific Island leaders here in New Zealand, but also a number of rugby people. And our raison d'etre, our philosophy is we want to assist the Pacific Island unions. We want to assist our players. Our ownership structure has basically set up a trust with the unions and the players as the beneficiaries of that trust. Obviously, in order to make these things work, you also need money. So in terms of 2021, it became obvious that there couldn't be any guarantees beyond 2021. New Zealand Rugby had pitched the process to be for a 5-year license. But when we really examined the situation, that they weren't in a position to do that because they still had commitments to SANZAR. And SANZAR obviously is the body, that's South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and Argentina, that runs Super Rugby in this part of the world. So if they couldn't guarantee that, then what we had to do was we wanted to be involved in 2021. So we went back to New Zealand Rugby and we said, well, all you're offering is a 1-year situation. We can't go to any sort of investors and say, you know, are you going to put all this money in for 1 year? So we came up with a partnership proposal with New Zealand Rugby, Sky TV, the Rugby Players Association, and some other some of the other groups actually were we collaborated with, and we put that to New Zealand Rugby. The broadcaster Sky TV recognised the fact that if we've got a 6-team competition rather than a 5-team competition, you're going to have something like 10 or 11 more games in the competition, more sponsors, more subscribers, more interest, more fan engagement. So I think it's 22 games as opposed to 33 games. So it's adding value,
yes,
to the competition. And as a result of that, if you add value, then hopefully there's more money paid for those rights, which we reasoned would have largely paid for the team in that first year. There are investors about, but that was essentially what our proposal was.
BG, it sounds like, you know, the New Zealand Rugby Union is just dangling the carrot before the cart, and, you know, teasing the so-called teams that are applying, you know, because on one hand you had the chairman or the president, MP, talking about the need to include Pacific Island Rugby somewhere along their competition. And on the other hand, they're actually taking it or making it a lot more challenging for the Pacific Islands to get involved. Are they afraid that this could become a very successful Pacific Island team? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, I do, absolutely. And funny you mentioned that. There's an article in this morning's New Zealand Herald, written by Gregor Paul, that says exactly that. That it's a fear factor. And Inga, we were involved back in 95. I don't know, maybe you weren't at the 95 World Cup, you were definitely at 99, when rugby went professional. And the Manu Samoa, we'd made the quarterfinals of 2 Rugby World Cups in 91 and 95. Fiji had made it in 1987, and we'd played in Super Rugby, the Super 10, I think they called it back then,
Correct.
right up to that point, and we'd beaten teams like Queensland and Auckland and Waikato and Otago. We were beating them all, you know, and then suddenly we were left out in the cold. There was no consultation whatsoever, and I, along with many others, was hugely disappointed. And what resulted from that? We were left out. As you know, all of our players, our Manu Samoa players, had to go offshore to earn their income.
That's right.
Became professional. So many of you know, you were already in England playing league for Wigan, and then you turned to rugby. So all the guys, Pat Lamb and Junior Paramore and Apollo Perolini, went to the UK and all did remarkably well. Ferretti Tuilangi, so many others. But it meant that all our boys were away, and whenever we tried to put our Manu Samoa team together, it was a real logistical exercise to bring them back in. They'd all been training under different coaches. Sometimes it was at the end of the UK season when everyone was a bit tired, and then you expected to go out and play against the All Blacks, you know, and gosh, in 1993 we did really well against the All Blacks.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I remember BG, one of the strengths of Samoan rugby and being able to hold that kind of level of rugby at such a long period of time was because you're right, our players were playing in the National League competition here in New Zealand. You know, the Aucklands, the Waikatos, all those provinces, Wellington. So there was a constant, integration between our Pacific Island boys or Manu Samoa players, as well as with the Kiwi boys. But then once that Super League kicked in, it forced the Pacific Islands to head north. You know, the Fijis and the Tongans, they went north for employment. And I'm just very grateful because I was part of that as well.
Yeah, you were. Yeah.
Way back in the early 90s. And we are struggling. We it looks like that we've been slowly been pushed to the side. Not long ago, I had another guest here, and we were talking exactly the same thing, BG, that the challenge that we have with our Pacific Islanders is that the World Rugby is expecting us to always perform at the World Cup, to pull the rabbit out of the hat all the time, to create this incredible atmosphere that only the Pacific Islanders can do at the major events. We did it with 1991 when we beat Wales in Cardiff Arms Park. We did it again in 1999 with yourself against Graham Henry. Against Graham Henry, Welsh team. You know, it's obviously an uneven playing field. And again, this is another kick in the guts, you know, when purely from a rugby lover, a Pacific Island supporter that just loves to see our Pacific Islanders play at the highest level. This is a real kick in the guts in terms of, New Zealand Rugby Union saying one thing, but then they do something totally different, you know? So where does that leave us? What's your thought on that? Where does that leave us in the Pacific Islands?
Well, it leaves us feeling very, very disappointed, very frustrated, Inga, as I felt 25 years ago, and so many others felt 25 years ago. The noises coming out of New Zealand rugby were so supportive. As you say, the chairman said he wanted a Pacifica team in Super Rugby, and the Saratipu report recommended that also. The broadcaster has indicated to us that they definitely want it, Sky TV. So it seems to me that everyone should be trying their darndest to get that across the line. But here we have a board meeting the other day that voted against it. And I've got to say that it comes from self-interest. You know, the franchises apparently are really fearful of losing players, and they're also fearful of losing some fan base as well.
Yes.
And I can understand them having those concerns, but there's a way bigger picture. I think, you know, if you create more excitement for the competition, and all those players coming into this part of the world. Let's be honest, Inga, you and I both played for the All Blacks, and we were very proud All Blacks, and I'm still a very proud Kiwi. The All Blacks is still going to have a huge attraction for our people, because it is number one, All Black rugby. But at the same time, we want Samoa and Tonga, Fiji, and the Cook Islands and any of the other Pacific Island nations to be as good as they possibly can be in rugby, because our people are so invested in the way our teams go. And I've been really disappointed to see, you know, Samoa drop down from number 7 to number 16 in the last, you know, 7 or 8 years. It's very disappointing.
PG, the gap is widening, whether we like it or not. We've got to accept the fact that without good funding and good support and good systems in place and good governance, Pacific rugby is on a downward spiral. I hate to say it, but that's the reality. A few years before this, and you were involved in this, New Zealand, remember the Pacific Island team that was put together, you know, and that was a fantastic initiative. And you know what? A lot of our Pacific Island community, as well as New Zealand diehard rugby supporters, got behind it. They played against Australia. They did extremely well. They played also against New Zealand, and they did extremely well. Yeah. You talk about this fear factor, you know, the fear of allowing the Pacific Islands to continue to grow by strength and strength. Is that the case we got here if we let a Pacific Island team in? Because it's been long overdue. We've been talking about this. This is not a new concept, PG. This has been around for as long as I can remember, 25 years.
Oh, I know. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you know, every year that goes by, I've felt this frustration and pain, if you like, of not having a Pacifica team in Super Rugby. It is definitely holding back the aspirations and the hopes of all our people, because if those guys are able to play at Super Rugby level on a weekly basis and then feed back into the national teams, the international competition around this part of the world would become really competitive, and it would create so much extra interest in the fans. The broadcasters would love it, and you know, everyone would benefit. So as I say, those people aren't looking at the bigger picture. The All Blacks, as we said, would still they'd grab the cream of the crop.
Yes,
and you know, the franchises would certainly still. There's so much talent. You knowing it. There's so much talent to go around, and let's keep it in this part of the world. If we don't,
yes,
then it's going to go off to Australia, or it's going to go off somewhere else.
Yes.
So keep it here, and we can all enjoy it.
BG, thank you. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back, because I don't know about you, but they're sitting in the studio here in Samoa. I can sense the passion that you have, the pride of being a Pacific Islander. This is oozing from your words and your facial expression on Zoom, BG. So we're going to come back and we'll talk a little bit more and just see where we can go. I mean, we've talked for so long about it. Where can we get some actions? Where can we get some results that's going to turn the table, that's going to encourage our Pacific Islanders? Like you said, it's not a threat to New Zealand rugby. And there's no threat here. This is an opportunity to give back, to work together, to lift one another, because World Rugby, according to their rules, they want to globalize the game. And to globalize the game, you got to give everyone the same opportunities. But it might not be the same playing field, but the same opportunities, and support them. So, if you're tuning in from wherever you are on the globe to Inga Da Winger's Sporting Hour here, my guest is the wonderful Sir Bryan Williams, or BG as he's known around the world. And we're going to come take a short break, a music break, and come back and we'll talk, because I'm starting to warm up to this whole thing about Pacific Island rugby. Shall we be involved? Shall it be a success? Who knows? We'll take a quick break. Beach, we're still live on FM.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So you can go. You can do your shout out if you want.
Hey?
You can do because we're live on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
You can have your shout out to anyone.
Well, I'd like to give my shout out to my sister Lorraine and
Yes.
and my nephew Mana and Faina.
Yes.
Hope you're all good. Sorry, Law, you couldn't make it to my birthday party on Saturday. Rest assured, I celebrated for everyone.
I've got some. Oh, I'm not going to repeat what I just heard.
What was that?
Nothing. Some shout outs to Phil Roberts. Phil Roberts tuned in from Brisbane. Big hello to you, my friend. Li'i Anai from Sydney. Okay, so thank you for tuning in. Talo Esotoa. So that's Talo Esotoa from Sydney. Lorraine Williams, yes, she's tuning in. Hello, Lorraine. Obviously, you just heard your brother say, missed you at his birthday party on the weekend. Deborah Tia from Wellington. Big shout out to you. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the superstar that we've got here on our Zoom here with BG. And Maea Tamasese, if you're tuning in, thank you for supporting us. And guess who? I got the boss of the studio.
Oh,
Hello, Brian.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, good. I just want to say, big fan.
Thank you.
And I remember, I think Inga was sitting on his uncle's shoulders, and I think I was sitting on Inga's shoulders watching you back in the days. Amazing. It's awesome to have you on the show.
I'm thrilled to be on the show. I'm thrilled to be on your show and Inga's show. And Inga was such a wonderful player and a great friend to me, both with the Auckland days, but particularly with the Manu Samoa days when we came together, Inga, and we had that beautiful period together. 99, what year was it? 96. Your first game with Manu Samoa was against Ireland on Lansdowne Road, and you absolutely terrorised the Irish that night, and we won 5-1. So that was what we were capable of.
Margin, didn't we, Beach?
Yeah.
Beating a what do you call it, Six Nations team, 40 points to 25. Wow. Yeah.
But 5-1. They only scored one try and kicked a whole lot of penalties, and we were blown off the field by the ref, but we still scored 5 tries.
I'd like to see those numbers again.
Yeah.
So sorry, we were just with Lorraine on Saturday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're out at the beach, and so she mentioned it was your birthday. So happy birthday.
Yeah, she rang me a couple of times.
Yeah. So we had some news for you on your birthday.
Good. Good.
New coconut cocktails.
Oh, good.
Awesome.
Okay, you guys. Hello, thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Come on. How are we going? How long we got? Oh, thanks, BG. Look, because obviously it's been the talking point on at the cafes this morning when they had your photo on, and then obviously the New Zealand news that's coming on over here, so on the radio station. So it's been the talking point all morning. And why not? I think it's really important that we be able to voice our disappointments and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to say, okay, where to from here?
Yeah.
Is that okay, Beach?
Yeah.
Okay. How we go? Oh, we're on a song. Oh, you got 1 minute to go. Oh, okay, we got another minute. Anyone? Oh, shout out to Lucky and Bex from Pure Pacific Water, wherever you are. Big good morning to you guys, and also Neil Stevenson from again Pure Pacific Water. Big shout out to Philip Moore from Coffee Roasters. And also Vailima Breweries, to Brent and the crew. A big thank you for coming on board and just being part of our show. Who else? To all my family out in Auckland there, to my children and my grandchildren. So a big shout out there. We'll be coming live very shortly if you're tuning in to our Facebook, live on our Facebook on 87.5 FM. So we'll be going back live very shortly, Beach.
Okay.
Have you had a chat with Iceman yet? You haven't?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, sorry about the rackets behind the scenes. So
That's all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still doing your boxing?
Good morning. If you're joining me on Inga Da Winger's Sporting Hour here on 87.5 FM, Ice by Radio. If you're on our Facebook app, download it. And that, again, that's Ice by 87.5 FM Samoa. My guest this morning is the wonderful Sir Bryan Williams. BG, as he's known all around the world. And we've just been talking about this whole disappointment of missing out on this 2021 Super Rugby Aotearoa Pacific Island team. And for those who are just tuning in, Sir Bryan is the one that's been spearheading this with a lot of people who wants to see Pacific Island rugby do really, really well. So we talked about the disappointment. So BG, where to from now? I mean, what's your next step? I mean, it's not over from what I've heard, but you certainly, can you enlighten us a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah, well, it isn't over, Inga, but we now need to take stock and be constructive going forward. We've expressed our disappointment at what's happened. And I mean, for someone like me, I could go on and on about it, but we need to try and be constructive about going forward. So New Zealand Rugby have come back to us and said, well, we definitely want a Pacifica team or two in the competition in 2022. The only problem is, at the moment, there's no certainty about what form that competition is going to take. New Zealand Rugby at the moment seem to be in a real standoff with Australian rugby. And I, as an ex-All Black, and I'm sure you'd feel the same way, we need Australia. New Zealand needs Australia. World Rugby needs Australia. We need Australian rugby to be strong and part of our competitions down in this part of the world. So I really can't see the merit in falling out with Australia. So going forward, we anticipate something like a Super 12, 5 New Zealand teams, 5 Australia, and 2 from the Pacific. And that sort of competition would have great appeal to the broadcasters and the sponsors. And one of the things about Super Rugby up to this point in time I was involved for a couple of years, I helped coach the Hurricanes for a couple of years. The travel factor is just absolutely debilitating. You fly to South Africa and you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and you can't get back to sleep. Now, when you're meant to be playing, you're falling asleep. So it makes it really difficult for the players and everyone else. So, and the cost involved, the cost of all that long distance travel. The world is changing with the use of fossil fuels and flying and global warming and that sort of thing. So I think we need to come up with different ways of doing things. So a more localized competition in this part of the world.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, I was one of those guys that also experienced that with yourself over the years, and it is time consuming. It's a lot of money that's being spent. The players' welfare and their health and safety. The game has changed, and personally, myself, I would love. Do you remember, BG, when Super Rugby first started? The only Pacific team that was involved was the winner of the triangular competition between Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji.
That's right. Yeah.
And the winner of that represented the Pacific in that team, and that went well. So it forced the Pacific Islands to really step up the game if they wanted to play in the Super Rugby. And then, unfortunately, when the game evolved again and they expanded it, from what I've heard, and it's just again rumors that I heard, the voting, the support from from New Zealand wanting an extra team, and in return, if they had the vote from the Pacific Island, in return that they will get an inclusion, but that never ever happened. And it just seems to me that history is repeating itself. Everyone's good at paying lip service, and that's all they're doing. New Zealand Rugby is doing is just paying lip service to the whole thing. The reality, BG, is this. If you look at New Zealand Rugby now, it's the Pacific Islanders that's dominating, certainly in Auckland. If you look at the schools, if you look at club rugby that you're involved heavily in, and you've done an incredible job by being there at the grassroots, helping develop. The Pacific Island participant is just incredible. Then you move into the secondary schools, first 15 rugby. And from what I heard, it's like 78% are Pacific Islanders. And out of that 78%, something like 61% are Samoan players. Then you go from there to club rugby, and it just gets even bigger. The bigger percentage, 82% are Pacific Islanders, and 70-something or 68% are Samoans in the Auckland club rugby competition alone. The team that's just been announced, the All Black squad, you had 11 Samoans, 3 Fijians, and 3 Tongans. So the reality is that the Pacific Islanders are there to stay, and New Zealand Rugby have no threat at all. They don't have to be fearful, because that conveyor belt of talent from the Pacific community is always going to be there. And you are right, BG. If you put a jersey, a All Black jersey, one Samoa jersey, Tongan jersey, and a Fijian jersey to a New Zealand-born Pacific Islander, they will always go for the All Black jersey, because that's how much they are held in esteem and held with pride. And all you're saying here, BG, is we want an even playing opportunity, a chance. I mean, 2022 is a long way away. Really, they really are not giving us any leeway here. And I think that's a bit embarrassing on their behalf. Sorry, BG, your turn.
No. Well, that's the point. And what we said to them is out of sight, out of mind. If you don't go with the Pacifica team in 2021, out of sight, out of mind. So come 2022, and suddenly something else comes along, and then, oh, sorry, oh, that's right, we forgot about you guys. Oh, that's right, we said we were going to include you. That's right, and and then the same thing repeats itself. So we just feel, and to be fair, we are definitely running out of time. But the longer this goes on, every day that goes by means that we're not able to start the organisation, you know, because there's nothing, no guarantees.
Yes.
So, yeah.
You're exactly right. And I think that's what's starting to annoy a lot of people. I think what we need, I mean, what the answer is very simple. Include us and support us. If you don't feel that we have enough resources, then help us build it. You know, because I've got no doubt. I mean, I'll give you an example. Rugby league, Tonga, Matima Tonga show the rest of the world with very little money, they were able to punch, okay, we'll just use this expression, punch above their weight. But not only that, create a phenomenon that even the New Zealand and Australian rugby league boards were envious of because of that fan base. And that fan base is worth millions and millions and millions of dollars to the game itself. However, I had the privilege, Sir BG, in November last year I was in Tonga when the Matima Tonga was given a public holiday by the King. I was there when they were celebrating. I sat down with John Hopawate. I sat down with Jason Tomalola, and I just asked, well, how did you guys do it? And this is what they said. Inga, we just got around and said, let's pick the best Tongans players that are available and let's ask them, would they be willing to come on this journey? And this journey was about pride for their country. They knew that the Tongan Rugby League didn't have the funds to support them and pay them well. But all they wanted to do was give something back to Tonga whilst they were still at the prime of their careers. And the rest was history. The rest was history. And I think, you know, yes, it is about the money, but it's also more about the opportunities and just a chance to prove themselves. I've got no doubt. We've got the biggest Pacific Island community in Auckland than anywhere else in the world. The fan base will be absolutely incredible.
It would. Yeah, absolutely right, Inga. One of the other things that we put to New Zealand rugby, you know, these existing super teams, they have squads of about 40 players, 38, 40 players. And many of the players don't get to play. And we said to them, well, let's try and stand up a team for 2021. Maybe each of those teams could give us a two loan players, and they'd be playing, and in the meantime getting some meaningful rugby instead of spending all their time training and holding tackle bags and getting no rugby, and that idea seems to have fallen on deaf ears as well. Oh no, we're not going to share with you. No, you know. So
BG, do you feel they feel threatened because they've had so much control? The New Zealand Rugby Union has had a lot of control over how their rugby is developed, how it's been nurtured, how it's been promoted around the world. And yes, they've got every right to protect that. They've got every right to protect their image, their property, their intellectual property, call it what you want. But do you feel that they've been threatened? Because once they open up this opportunity for the Pacific Islanders, they feel the fear of these Pacific Islanders turning their backs against New Zealand rugby? I can't see that happening because, like I said, we both agreed early on, the whole idea is to give the opportunities for the Pacific Islanders to shine. Whether that's for New Zealand or for the smaller nation, I don't see a threat at all. But New Zealand has always been held in high regard by the Pacific Island players as well as the Pacific Island community as the gatekeepers for Pacific Island rugby. And it seems to me that there's a bit of a threat. They feel threatened that they will lose that opportunity.
Well, I mentioned that article in today's Herald, and it's basically about the fear factor, and not only the fear factor from New Zealand rugby, but also the fear factor from the world. When Pacifica was left out of Super Rugby, you know, as you know, we suddenly have teams like Ireland and Wales and England with all these Polynesians playing for them, and you know, I mean, how many did England have? 4 or 5 with the Vunipola brothers and
Langi brothers.
yeah, Nathan Hughes and yeah. So
I mean, that's the reality, isn't it, BG? The reality is that we are the best rugby nations in the world. We export our talent all around the world.
Yeah,
and
natural talent, absolutely.
Yes. And what's happening is if we don't look after our own, then we're going to have the big countries like England, like Ireland, start picking up our players because no one wants to help us. You know, yes, we have our own external internal issues that every union has in developing their players, promoting their players, you know, marketing their players out there on the international market. But the reality is, unless we get help and unless we get that support behind our, you know, Pacific Island rugby is pretty much dead and buried. We only turn up to play the World Cup. Well, what's the point? You know, because we can't develop our rugby.
No, exactly right, Inga. And so that really needs to change. You said where do we go from here? Well, we just have to keep fighting, you know, because eventually this team is going to happen. I had Sir Graham Henry, Ted came up to me and he tapped me on the shoulder the other day. He said, "If not now, BG, when? If not now, when?" I said, "Now, mate, right now."
BG, I still remember when Sir Bill Beaumont was elected as to carry on as the president of World Rugby. The question was put to him by breakdown star J.K., Mills Mullane, and Jeff Wilson, and that question was put before him. I mean, is there going to be help from the Pacific Island from World Rugby for the Pacific Island team to be included? And I did remember, and I did recall him saying that, yeah, even if we have to, you know, look at funding a Pacific Island team into the Super Rugby, you know, it can only be good for rugby as a whole. Now, that's what I heard, and that's what I saw on TV. Yeah. Maybe, again, that's something that, you know, your organization, the Moana organization, could consider going to Sir Bill Beaumont and said, "Hey, you remember you shared this vision, your desire. Can you still help us here? Because you've got to pull all your strings that you can hold on to, couldn't you?"
Yeah. Well, that certainly was an option and is an option, Inga. I haven't gone into detail about where the money was going to come from, but I've got no doubt. We've been talking with a group from Fiji, Pacifica Rugby, and they have access to investment funds. We've got no doubt that there are investors available, but at the moment we haven't got anything to present to them. You know, you can't go to an investor and say, "Well, we've only got 1 year," or in fact, we've got no years at the moment because we haven't got anything. So how do you go to an investor and say, "Well, can you put in a few $1 million just for the hell of it?"
Yeah, no, that's true. It's true. It's got to benefit everybody. And you know, we're going to take another quick short break, and we'll come back and I want you to elaborate a little bit about how the unions, the 3 unions, can actually benefit from having a team like Moana Rugby inside Super Rugby Aotearoa. Is that okay, Beach? Yeah. So we'll take a quick break, and just before that, I just want a quick shout out to Thomas Hunter from Tonga. You know, tuning in from Tonga. Thank you, malolele, fefe hake, as they say in Tonga. So thank you to Thomas Hunter for tuning in from Tonga. So we'll take a quick break. My guest, the beautiful, always humble Sir Bryan Williams, BG, as he's known. So there's my guest. We'll come back and we're going to talk a little bit about how we can help get this team into the 2021 season of Super Rugby Aotearoa. Thank you. Yeah, Beach. Funny, eh?
Well,
it's almost deja vu.
Well, it's deja vu. I don't call it funny because I've been losing a bit of sleep over it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, you're going grey very quickly, BG.
You're getting there, mate.
I just shaved mine so no one can see my grey hair. But boy, look, I think, yeah, you know, the other help is like you said, is being able to get the support from the unions themselves and say, look, let's just buy into all this, you know, let's channel everything under one organization, and as long as they benefit in the long run. Because, you know, when you know, I looked at the long-term benefits of getting a team into the Super Rugby Ultimate. New Zealand will also benefit, BG, immensely. You know, the fans will come out in their numbers. They, you know.
But they're actually talking about a development competition aligned to the 2022 competition, which would involve, hopefully, the A teams of the Pacific Islands, you know, coming and playing teams down in New Zealand, and vice versa, bringing teams up to the islands to play games up here. And that's certainly part of our proposal too, to bring the teams back to the islands for games.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, you remember, you know, when the Pacific Islanders was first put together, I thought they did really well, and then all of a sudden they chopped that. Then they put the Pacific Rim competition for the Tier 2 competition, and that was going really, really well. It was great for our, you know, the second tier teams to be able to travel to Canada, to the US, to Japan, to Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. You know, it was just good competition, and then all of a sudden they cut that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, yeah, keep on keeping on.
I suppose you get tired. I suppose you do get tired, BG, just repeating yourself. The same thing that we said 5 years ago, or no, 25 years ago. It's the same thing that we're still going through.
Yeah. What I want to emphasize, though, is that the people who are involved in our group, and I've got to say, I didn't particularly know them before we became involved, but I've been very impressed by them.
That's Moana Pacifica, is it?
Yeah. So Tavita Funaki and Pelanato Sakalia, they're the co-chairman, and they're both involved with the Pacific Business Development Trust.
Yes.
And you know, Jerome Mika, Malua Tipi with the Whono.
Yes.
So there are lots of Herman Retzlaff is involved on the group, and Amanyasi Kefu, he's former Attorney General of Tonga.
Yes.
So and one of the young ladies from Deloitte, a girl called Lisa Tai, she's part Fijian, just very capable, very smart, you know, very smart people, but really representative of the community.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then we've got the rugby side of things as well, with Ronnie Clark and
yes,
Michael and Kevin Senior.
Yes, actually, it would be nice to talk about those roles of those two, because they're very prominent roles. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So Kevin is with the Players Association.
Yeah.
And Ronnie's with the NZRU.
Yeah. But Rob Nicol is also, we've been consulted to by New Zealand Rugby Players Association, and they're a really key player in all of this. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go back live. We're coming into our we're coming to our final segment, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you're tuning in to Inga Da Winger's Sporting Hour this morning on iSpy Radio FM Samoa, well, with the last 40 or so minutes, I've had the privilege of hosting my dear friend, Sir Bryan Williams, or BG as he's known. We talked about this whole period about the inclusion of Pacific Island Super Rugby team in Aotearoa, and why it's important to have it now and not wait to 2 years later. And unfortunately, their request has been turned down to be involved in that team for next year. However, all is not lost. They're still working behind the scenes. So that's my wonderful guest that I'm hosting this morning on Inga Da Winger Sporting Hour. Just a quick shout out before we come back to BG, to Barry from Auckland, Samoa, and Wiki from Wellington. So those two from Auckland, now if you're tuning in, thank you for tuning in. And Wiki from Wellington. Hello, Wiki. So back to our main talking point about the Pacific Island team. Its inclusion in the Super Rugby. BG, your organisation behind the scenes, and you talked about how well you've been impressed with this organisation and the people that's behind steering this group to really get involved and really showcase that we can look after ourselves. There are people in our community that are well qualified. Can you tell us a little bit about the Moana Pacifica organisation?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, I've been very impressed by all of them, really. I didn't know them before I got involved. I didn't know all of them. I knew some of them. But our co-chairs are Pelenato Sakalia and Tavita Funaki, and both of them, I think, CEO and Deputy CEO of the Pacific Business Development Trust. So they're used to dealing with business and business proposals and putting deals together. So they've both got a lot of experience. And we've got Malua Tipi. I think he's CEO or Deputy CEO of the Whānau. Jerome Mika, who's got close links to politicians and trade unions and many other things. Herman Retzlaff, former Attorney General, I think, of Samoa, and Aminyasi Kefu, former Attorney General of Tonga. Yeah. Those are some of the people. Lisa Tai from Deloitte.
Yes.
She's been great, and one of the partners at Deloitte, Doug Wilson, has done a great job. We're really pleased at what Deloitte have been able to do for us with their feasibility study. But alongside that, we've also been working closely with the New Zealand Rugby Players Association, Rob Nicol and Kevin Senior.
Yes.
Kev, of course, was Peter Fatt's nephew.
Yes.
And good Ponsonby man. He still coaches Ponsonby Premiers, Inga. 2 Gallagher Shields in a row.
Yes.
I've got to mention that all the time.
One-eyed Ponsonby boy.
Oh, yeah. So those people, and there are others, they've been an absolute pleasure to work alongside, I've got to say. And obviously, we're all feeling pretty disappointed at the moment, but no one's giving up. We're still plugging ahead. You mentioned before about the Pacific Island national bodies, Samoa, Fiji, Tonga rugby unions, and Cook Islands for that matter.
Yes.
What we want to try and achieve is to create an entity in that New Zealand Super Rugby competition that will aid the unions. If the players are able to come together and play meaningful rugby on a weekly basis at the very top level, all those players are going to be able to feed back in to the national teams of all those island nations, and that's going to hopefully then create an international tournament in this part of the world.
Yes.
That can be absolutely totally competitive and meaningful, and the fans would be engaged and the broadcasters would be engaged. That's one of the issues with Pacifica Rugby at the moment, because we haven't been included in the mainstream competition. No money flows back to the islands. You have to rely on handouts from World Rugby. And as we know, sometimes if they don't like what's going on, sometimes they withhold the funding. Fortunately, I see Tonga Rugby has had its funding reinstated just this week. So we need to have a better scenario than that. So that's what our group is trying to achieve.
BG, there is concerns that an organisation such as World Rugby are so dominant and controlling to the point where it actually is not very beneficial for the game in our own islands, because you talk about Tonga being re-granted their application for more funding was being withheld, and you're saying about we're tired of handouts. What we really need from World Rugby and New Zealand and that is a hand up approach where I think if the best scenario that could happen for both New Zealand Rugby and New Zealand, the Pacific Island team is this, that you come with your proposal and say, well, how can we help you get into this competition? That be the best scenario for both sides, because it's a win-win. New Zealand gets to see the Pacific Island play a brand rugby that's always been there in the beginning, flair, dynamic, uncompromising, unpredictable, and instead of our Pacific Islands having to go overseas and be lost to European clubs, you can still keep them here. It makes sense. Yeah. And all we're saying to the unions, hey, come on, give us a go. First of all, you say we want you guys to be included, yeah, but then you're stopping us because of this and that. Surely, yeah. How are you going to know how good you are if you can't test yourself against the best? How are you going to know if they can't even offer you their support? Yes, it just feels like they're suppressing us. That's what it looks like. They just continue to suppress us until we are totally dependent on them. So and it does hurt. It really does hurt.
Yeah, that's what the article in the Herald actually says today, Gregor Paul, exactly, the fear factor. But it is short-sighted, and they need to be called out on it, as far as I'm concerned, because it's just not good enough.
Yes, you're right, BG. If you're listening in, we're talking about this whole inclusion or non-inclusion now of this New Zealand, this Pacific Island team in the New Zealand Super Rugby Aotearoa. Disappointing, yes, to say the least. We are gutted that we can't get a team in and the consideration is for 2022, and that's miles away. You might as well not even think of that far ahead, because we don't know what's going to happen in today's climate, So, but we've just been talking about how we can continue to support and support our bid, and I say ours because we're all buying into this whole thing, isn't it?
Everyone, we're all in this together. Absolutely,
yeah. And but the disappointment, and I feel for you, BG, and I want to congratulate you guys and your organisation this far for taking it this far, because like you said, there was 7 other applicants that they're vying for that same opportunity. But it just makes sense, doesn't it, BG? It just makes sense to include a Pacific Island team. Really, what have they got to lose other than better, exciting rugby, style of play?
Well, that's the thing that we're most disappointed with, Inga, the fact that the chairman of New Zealand Rugby said that he didn't believe we could put together a competitive team.
Who's the chairman?
Brent Impey.
Yeah.
In announcing the decision, he didn't think we could put together a competitive team. And secondly, that we didn't have the commercial or financial wherewithal to put it together anyway, which we just find insulting, actually.
Yeah, it is. And especially from a chairman that after the post-World Cup was on television saying that he was disappointed at the World Rugby for not having included more initiatives and opportunities for Pacific Islanders. So this is where it becomes really strange, isn't it, BG?
Yeah.
On one hand, he's saying, "Well, we need to include the Pacific Islanders." Next minute, he's not including, or he doesn't vote to have it. I mean, this is where he could make a big impression to World Rugby and say, "This is how you do it." You know, what is it that you need? You know, Moana Pacifica. What is it that you need in terms of support? You know, governance, administration, finances, because they know we don't have the money. You know, but don't dangle the carrot before us and expect us to, you know, otherwise we just become suppressed and depressed and stressed.
Talking about the money side of it, Inga, by not including us in the mainstream, then you exclude us from any of the avenues of finance. You know, the television revenue and the sponsorship. So it's sort of a double whammy. You know, you've got no opportunity to rise above it, and you know, we know that our unions struggle financially, which means that you're always on the back foot. You know, you've never quite got enough to achieve what you want to achieve.
Yes.
And all these other unions are you know, sort of raking it in, although to be fair, New Zealand Rugby's in a bit of a hole at the moment. They've announced that the losses over this current year are going to be pretty extensive. So
yes,
there is some sympathy for that, but surely you need to be forward looking. How do you create more income producing avenues?
Yes.
If you continue to do the same as you've been doing, well, you'll continue to make losses. Let's try and come up with something that's exciting and is going to create fan engagement, and that the broadcasters can get their teeth into.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, our time is pretty much up. We've run over our time, but that's the excitement when you're so passionate about a topic. And in this case, it's our inclusion or non-inclusion of the Super Rugby Aotearoa competition for 2021. My guest is the beautiful, wonderful, humble Sir Bryan Williams, BG, to many of us. And BG, we thank you for your time, my dear friend. And, you know, we can talk on and on and on, but just want to say thank you. And for all our listeners that are tuning in, I hope you've got just a little glimpse of the passion that this man has for Pacific Island rugby. You know, it's not just his wonderful career that spanned over a couple of decades, but it's just the way he's carried himself, the way he continues to be a wonderful leader. Even in fact, we almost missed it, BG. We almost missed it. BG's had his big birthday on the weekend, so a big happy birthday. We won't mention your numbers on the program, but it was apparently a wonderful celebration of your.
Don't mention it, but there was a 7 in it.
Yeah, there's a 7. The rest is 0, 0, 0, 0. Anyway, but BG, congratulations. Thank you for giving up your time, my dear friend, and just talking, giving us an insight. Look, we want to back you. We want to support you in whichever way we can. I hope New Zealand Rugby Union will reconsider the decision. I hope they'll come to the table and make this work, because it's not just about us. This is not about us. This is about the current players, the future, and the players still yet to come. You know, the little BGs and the little Jonah Lomus of this world, they're still yet to pull on their boots and run on Saturday mornings at on those rugby fields in Auckland, all around Aotearoa. BG, this is the opportunity. You want to say any last words before we round it off?
Well, Inga, it's an absolute pleasure always to catch up with you, my dear friend. And as you say, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's about us, and it's about we're fighting for something. I believe that's so fundamental and worthwhile. It's been a grievance that I've felt for 25 years, and as you say, I'm advancing in years. But I want to I want to do something about it, because it's not fair. It's simply not fair, and all the reasons that are being meted out as to why it can't happen don't hold water with me. They don't hold any weight.
Yes.
And I think you can all see that. I hope you can. So we all need to, sort of come together on this and make sure it happens.
Thank you so much, Sir Bryan William. That's the end of our program. We wish you all the very best for the starting of the week. Wherever you're tuning in from around the globe, make sure you download our app on 87.5 FM on iSpy Radio. Take care. Look after yourself. Be kind to one another. Take care and God bless you. You all right, Ben?
Yeah, good, Inga. That was fine.
So much, my friend.
Yeah.
And we can carry on and on and on.
Yeah. You go and have a good day, my friend.
Okay, we'll talk later on. Eh,
Yeah, love to your family.
Okay.
Okay, mate. See ya.